Hey, welcome back to Deck Check MTG. I'm Ganesh, and today let's rank the top 40-ish cEDH commanders by resiliency, and let's have fun doing it. We'll define resiliency as how easy it is for a deck to get back into the game after a win attempt or a value engine is stopped. So let's go ahead and get started with Joyra. This is a deck that lives or dies by its commander, so if she dies, it can be a little hard to get her back out, and a lot of times after she's back out, people will just kill her. So we're going to put her in the C tier for now. Najeela. This is a fairly resilient deck, especially since after the first win attempt gets stopped, you usually still have Najeela out, and you can use that 6 combats. So after 6 combats, Najeela will have like 120 warriors or something, and the entire table should be dead. So it's easy for her to just kind of sit there and keep attacking and draw cards and eventually get back in the game. Next up, we have Inala. This one is not quite as bad off as Joyra is, but it's really not quite as resilient as Najeela either. So after your first win attempt gets stopped, it can be a little bit hard to get back in the game. Now you can have things like copy a wizard and try to get like 2 instant sorceries or something. But aside from that, it can be a little bit tough. I would say she's just about average or maybe a little below average. Carrick is kind of also in the same boat here as Inala. I will put him below her because he's in less colors and you can't really run the draw engines that Inala can, so like Ristic, Mystic, and all that. Time is fairly resilient. A board wipe can really set them back though. It kind of depends on the board state. So if they're getting board wiped in the late game when they have like 5-6 lands available, they can try to start getting back in the game that way. But a lot of times it's really just completely decimates them. So we're gonna put them in the B tier for now. Niv Mizzet. This is another deck that kind of lives or dies by its commander. So if you're able to get him out and protect him, it's fine. But if he kind of gets removed, it's hard to get that triple blue, triple red casting cost out. But that said, a lot of times people are able to get him back out and protect him, and I would say he's definitely more resilient than Inala. So we'll bump him up to A tier for now and maybe move him down if it looks like it makes sense later. Urza, this is also going to be in the A tier. You run a lot of mana rocks and stuff, so if Urza gets killed the first time, you can usually just recast him the next turn and be fine. Relying on his activated ability is a little rough though, so we'll put him right about here. Next up is Godo. This is probably the worst in terms of resiliency. If your first win attempt gets stopped, you are really screwed. It's hard to make that much burst mana again. Newer variations of Godo are running a little bit more mid-range plan, but still, it's pretty bad. Yurko is very resilient. It does not take a lot for her to get back in the game. You just kind of, if Yurko ever gets killed, it literally doesn't matter. You just ninjutsu her out again with some other cheap attacker. So we're putting her in the S tier. She'll just keep coming back and back again with her ninjutsu ability. Dahada, she'll go in the B tier. She's similar to Inala in that after that first win attempt gets stopped, it's pretty hard to get back into the game. This is a very turbo ad nauseum kind of focus deck in Mardu. So if like you go silence and that gets countered and then you try to go for a win attempt and that gets stopped, you're left with like a planeswalker at like 1 health and like 2 cards in hand, and you don't have the draw engines in blue, so you're kind of stuck there. Corvold is pretty resilient. As long as you can keep getting Corvold out, it doesn't really matter too much. People look at this deck and think it's just a turbo dockside deck, which it is, but this can also play to the mid game and just kind of grind out cards with its very powerful ability here. Kinnan is possibly the most resilient commander we've seen so far because half the deck is mana rocks, so anytime he gets killed, you just recast him. The only time Kinnan really gets in trouble is if Kinnan gets stolen. but that's kind of rare. People don't play Gilded Drake as much anymore. Winota, we are putting in the D tier. It's a little bit better than Godo at getting back into the game, but if Winota gets killed once or twice, it can be pretty hard to stay in there, especially since you're never going to get any value from any of your other creatures. They're all stacks creatures, which sucks. Magda is not quite as bad off as Winota is, but it is fairly commander reliant. That said, a lot of Magda builds are on this weird kind of mid-range variant, so killing Magda doesn't completely stop them. I'd say it's tiny bit more resilient than Keurig is, because she only costs 2, and for Keurig to come back out, it'll cost you like 6 mana. So anyway, Obnix, very easy A tier. Even if he dies, the deck runs a lot of like turbo and value engines that make it not very difficult to get back in the game. So he doesn't really struggle too much in general. And actually, perhaps we will move Corvold down a tiny bit and him up a little bit, and Nujula up here. Next up is Sisay. Very good. All you really have to worry about with Sisay is just getting her back out. And that's usually not too difficult. Now, you can get hit by a pretty devastating board wipe, and that can take you back to the Stone Age. But usually just having Sisay and a bunch of mana out is all you really need. Tivit. It's going to be on the lower end of A tier. If your Tivit gets stopped, like that very first cast of it, it can be pretty hard to get back in the game. But you will eventually get Tivit back again. So it's not too much to worry about. And you are in 3 colors, so you do get Rhystic Mystics. Shorakai can get really wrecked, actually, if you kill his commander the first time, because they really rely on this activated ability to draw the cards to get them their land drops and ramp and stuff like that. So if you kill Shorakai the very first time, it can really, really screw them. So for that reason, we're going to put him in B for now. Next up is Atraxa. It's going to go in the A tier. If you kill her, if you stop her ETB once, it's not usually too hard for players to just go and recast it, like if she just gets countered or something. Especially if the game is going longer. People usually have answer for the first Atraxa, but not for the second Atraxa, because creatures are kind of hard to counter in general. Next up, we have Kenrith. We are going to put him also in the A tier, just because he has so much flexibility, and we can maybe knock Najila up a little bit here and Sisay. He can really do whatever he needs to, and 5 mana isn't too bad, so we'll move him up a little bit above Obnixilis here. Rocco, this is kind of a turbo deck. So don't get me wrong, it's hard to interact with, but if it gets stopped, you're kind of sitting there with like a Rocco that costs like, 5 or 7 mana just for the commander, not even counting the X ability. So it can be kind of hard to get back in the game after that. But I would say it's a little bit less resilient than Tayam. And Kerrik's even less resilient than those two, honestly, because you have really no value engines at all in your deck. It's all mostly just turbo. Alright, so moving on to the Gitrog monster. This is also very commander reliant, just like Shorakai. If you stop his first one attempt, he's kind of screwed, like these other turbo decks here. They're really trying to just get Gitrog out in the game very quickly. So yeah, we'll bump this guy down here. We'll bump him down here for now. Yeah, this is it's hard to say whether this is more resilient than Magda is, but this is a draw engine and Magda is not, so we'll put him up about here. Seems fine. Cody, pretty bad in resiliency. Once his first turbo ad nauseum gets stopped, they're kind of just out of the game, because they kind of have to fill their deck with these useless 1-drops and stuff. So we will put him right about here. He's rarely hard to get back in the game after your first Nos doesn't go off. Tesker is pretty good at being resilient. His activated ability lets you keep recycling cards. And it's the same amount of mana basically as Thrasios, even though you need colored mana, and you can politic a little bit to try to get people what you want, especially if someone else is winning. So we're going to put him in A tier for now. Talion, also very resilient. I'd say it's a little better than Obnix because usually he will draw a little bit more cards. And it's not too bad to recast him after the first time he dies. So we'll drop him right there for now. Bump this down for now. All right. Yeah, this actually makes a little bit more sense here. Okay. All right. So next up we have Bruce Thrasios. If this deck gets stopped too much early, it's completely out of the game, it feels like. But usually it doesn't happen. And things with like Seedborn, if they're able to land a Seedborn, they're just back in the game instantly. So we're going to go ahead and put him right about here. They run like a density of mana producing stuff anyway. So we're going to drop him. Yeah, this seems about correct. Maybe a little bit better than Talion and Kenrith as well. TNT, yeah, it's they're both Dronjin, so you're pretty much always going to get somehow back in the game. Now, whether or not you actually win is like a completely different story, but in terms of getting back and having resources and stuff, it really does not get better than this, honestly. Blue Farm, it is pretty freaking resilient. It's not as resilient as some of these other decks. It's not too hard to get your commanders back out. So we'll put him above Sisay, above Najeela, above this one. And honestly, yeah, it's not quite as resilient as Kinnan is, but it's close. Next up, we have Jessica Timna. This is more of a mid-range deck. Oh god, I picked up Godo, didn't I? We'll drop him right here for now. Yeah, it's pretty bad. We have Jessica Timna. So this one's like a mid-range kind of deck. Aims to control the board. I have not seen this deck in general struggle to recast Jessica almost ever, even if they're killing it. So we will drop them right about here. Malcolm Timna, very good. The only thing that would really hurt is if you get hit by like a board wipe. But Malcolm's Treasure Generation and Timna's attacking draw power makes this not too difficult to get back in the game in general, and you're in the right colors for draw. Sakashima Quark. This is such a weird one. Like, it really depends on like how fast they get their commanders out, if they're able to protect them. If they are, they kind of just win the game. But if they don't, they can sometimes still cheese things out. So I would put them like right about here. So still in the A tier, like it's not hard for them to just go sit there, recast their commanders, and just get back in the game by copying things a trillion times. Like even like fairly innocent spells like Get Probe or something is suddenly a draw 3 in this deck if they're able to get their commanders out. Rock Thrasios, another turbo deck that's just gonna struggle a bit if its first attempt gets stopped. That said, it's still a Thrasios deck, so it's not quite as helpless as some of these other decks are. But still, it's not that great at coming back. Next up is Timna Malcolm. This is also kind of like a quick combo deck. Yeah, once that first Glint Horn goes through, if it doesn't work, you're kind of screwed. So we're gonna put it right about here. Next up, we have Tempest Crom. Very consistent. You have 2 draw engines. Very resilient. Nothing really more needs to be said there. We'll drop Sisay down a tiny bit. This is definitely better at drawing than Najeela is. And this is about the same here. All right, Dargo Thrasios. This is like a weird kind of semi-turbo mid-range deck. If their first one attempt gets stopped, they're still okay, especially since they have Thrasios. So we will drop them right about here. here. They're in more colors than Talion is, so it's not too hard to kind of get back in the game there. Rogsai, this is going to drop in the B tier. Just because it's like a turbo deck that's really, really all in on turbo, and it's not like Thrasios where they can use Thrasios activations to get in the game. You're literally just going, and if your first one against attempt gets stopped, you're screwed. And now there is some caveats to that. Sometimes they can get like Ristics and Mystics out, just like any other deck, and fight through the mid game, but usually they're just banking on that turn 1, turn 2, turn 3 to win the game. Yeah, I'd say they're a bit more resilient than these other decks in general, just because their card quality is a bit higher. So Timnatana Bloodpod, we don't really see this often. They are in green. They do have Timna to kind of draw cards to try to get back in the game, but genuinely it really doesn't feel good trying to get back in the game with them. It is better than some of these other ones just because of Timna, but like it's rough. It can be pretty rough. Next up we have Malcolm Vile Smasher. This is also kind of gonna go in the S tier. This is sort of a Grixis like turbo deck that has access to green. You can also kind of go the Curiosity control with them, so it's really not too difficult to try to get back in the game with them. Yeah, so that'll do it. Quick reminder, 86% of viewers are not subscribed, so if you enjoy this type of content, just take a second real quick to hit that subscribe button. We are trying to hit 500 subscribers. Thank you very much. And also, a giant thank you to my patrons, JR and Matt.